Thanks for tuning in to this session of Beyond Bitcoin's Delegate Edition, giving potential delegates a unique opportunity to discuss their ideas, plans, and goals to fortify the BitShares ecosystem. If you're a potential delegate that would like to have your very own hangout, then please send an email to beyondbitcoin@gmail.com. If you find these hangouts useful and enjoyable, then please remember to vote for our delegate, fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Now let's join in and welcome today's featured delegate.
Today is Friday, February 6th, 2015. DataSecurityNode from BitShares Community is joining us to talk about his project called BunkerShares. And he'll give a little bit of an update on what he's working on. And true to the standard format, we will go then into community questions. Do you want to take it from here, Data?
You all know me as DataSecurityNode. You guys have probably heard about BunkerShares a little bit over the past week. It's something that's kind of in an idea stage right now, and the purpose for this meeting is actually to get feedback. Just want to get your guys' ideas at this stage because I'm kind of in a fork in a road right now. Earlier this week, I was approached once again by investors. To give you little bit of background regarding the bunker. Basically, I'm located in Nova Scotia, Canada. It's a 64,000 square foot Cold War bunker that's massive. And back in the day, it was actually handling NATO and Department of Defense secure communications to the rest of the world. So it's got a lot of awesome features, and I've been the proud owner of it for the past couple of years now. And I've been involved with the BitShares community since sometime last summer. It was a little too, things were developing a little too fast for me to keep up with. So I didn't really get too involved at that stage. And of course, with the bunker and all the things going on here, I really had to focus on that. But I've been approached by multiple investors over the past while. But last week, I got a pretty serious offering from a group representing approximately a dozen other data centers. And they said, we want to make you a mini conglomerate. Basically, I'll just get lots of money and I'll be a part of this big network of data centers, and I'll be set, fine, and good, and great. And life's going to be grand. But I've never had dealings with investors where everything was up front, and I am hesitant to deals like this. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, got 20 years experience, and I've never done an investor deal, though I've talked to lots of them. And I've seen lots of deals come and go, not with myself, but with friends. And even though these guys say, they're on my side, it's tough because at the end of the day, really, I realize that what matters to them is the deal. So it's not necessarily what happens after the deal. That's just a little bit of background. So right about that time when I talked to them, I was also having this idea about BunkerShares and about using the user-issued assets to raise the capital to execute projects at the bunker. Now, a lot of people don't know much about what could be happening there. At present, we actually have some data center operations going. We have tier 2 uptime availability right now, which is fine. It's great. It's like most data centers, but there's lots of upgrades that need to be done. And of course, it's going to take a lot of money to do that. In terms of what I had to do to actually acquire the bunker, drained me pretty badly. And so I really don't have the capitalization to execute on these things. And what makes it even more complicated is that even though the bunker is a massive asset, it doesn't fit into any traditional financial model. So we're not even able to utilize our banking relationships or anything like that, because how do you assess a bunker, right? So it's just too big. It's too complicated for them to understand. And so that puts us right back into the hands of investors. But being an entrepreneur, I always like to look at possibilities of other opportunities and ways to change the world. And that's definitely something I think we can do with BitShares. So the BunkerShares idea basically evolved out of some of the infrastructure we have available in the bunker. One of the cool things about it is that we've got these old Merley generators, which were designed back then to operate in lockdown condition. They're baseload generators, which means you turn them on and they just keep going forever. So with that, we recently discovered that they're ideal candidates for renewable energy running on biofuels, which are in large supply here in our region, and we secured supply with the second largest supplier in our region, so that's great. And so we were looking to be in the running for feeding energy to the grid, but that didn't work out due to the substation already being overloaded with renewable energy going to it. So that led to the question of, well, what do we do with this power and what do we do with this heat? Because we'll have lots of heat generated, we'll have lots of power being able to generate. And talking with the engineer that I've been working with on this, he said, you need a grow up. And so a lot of people, when they first hear about the bunker, they think, yeah, that place would be awesome for a grow up. And I hear stuff like that all the time.
Could you explain to anybody who's listening to this, what do you mean exactly by grow up?
I was about to get into that. So grow up is a common term for growing marijuana, right? The ganja, the hashish, whatever you want to call it. But here in Canada, a lot of you probably don't know, we actually have a federal framework for licensing medical marijuana growing operations. This was introduced early last year, as a matter of fact, after some other policies in the past failed in terms of being able to bring medical marijuana to the masses here in Canada. So they came up with this framework which allowed for operations to be able to be licensed by the federal government to be able to grow medical marijuana. So with that, there's stringent regulations involved in this. I mean, they spent a lot of time going into the security aspects and how it has to be handled and background checks. And it's a really extensive process to get these licenses. And part of the reason is because they don't want just small operators getting these licenses. They want big business. They want, serious business that has serious funding that's going to, follow the regulations and not give them tons of headaches in terms of compliance, right? So it makes sense. It's got a lot of the U.S. world, the U.S. Business world, just like tumbling over themselves to try to get here into Canada to be able to get operating. There's all kinds of operations right now that are going through the licensing process. It takes some time, and they have to, because it's so new. There's really no experts out there. There's nobody who can say, yeah, I'm an expert in being able to build these things and so on and get you compliant, because it's so new. So. In terms of the requirements for what's required to grow medical marijuana, as far as I know, I'm not an expert in it, but you need to have quite a bit of heat, and you have to have right growing conditions, and you have to have a lot of power because of the lights. And for the licensing, everything has to be located within a concrete building and all kinds of things. And of course, that's why a lot of people think that bunker would be ideal for that sort of thing. Now, with 64,000 square feet, we have the data center operation. The space for the data center operation will occupy a total of about 14,000 square feet. And we're looking at the space for the grow-op would be approximately anywhere from 12 to 16,000 square feet. So all this would be really amazing. But because data centers and because the medical marijuana grow-op are both requiring stringent security measures in terms of their personnel and how things are handled, it's a pretty good fit. So talking to the engineer, this came up, and then I had that meeting with the investors, and then I started to have this idea, and I started talking to people about the possibility of a user-issued asset called bunker shares, which would allow people to be involved. The asset would essentially be a share, which would be for the purpose of capitalizing the project of the bunker and giving back the value of the shares back to the people who invested. There's different ways this can be done, and like I said, this is just at the idea phase right now. Talking to different people, there's been the idea of doing an initial crowdfunding offer with the assets, so that we could sell them to those, and then once the crowdfunding offer is done, then it opens up to the open market. At that stage, the value should have increased significantly, and along with that, we've brought lots of users into BitShares, and we've also raised the funds necessary to actually execute the projects. Now, what it came down to though was that the data center aspect of things, I have a pretty good handle on that, because that's been my business for several years now in terms of virtual servers and dedicated server hosting and whatnot. So that's nothing that I'm not familiar with. However, the grow up operation, I know nothing about. I don't even smoke this stuff, just so all you guys know. So it's totally foreign to me. To me, this is, it's a business and that's it. So I'm really not too familiar with it. And of course, that led me to a thought process about the possibility of creating a social consensus company that runs on the blockchain. And as I started to think about this more and more, I realized how absolutely revolutionary this would be if we can pull it off. And I was really excited actually to hear about this this thing that Brent talked about with the canonizer, right? That looks interesting to me as a potential solution for how the community could come together in a social consensus to crowdsource the knowledge necessary to execute. I mean, all this industry, everybody has the guy, right? There's always the guy who knows what he's doing and so on, and everybody thinks they have the guy. I believe that with the power of numbers and crowdsourcing, we should be able to actually gain the knowledge necessary to put together a much more superior plan and then execute on that. And that's what Bunker Shares would do. Now, the media frenzy, in terms of like the way the bunker works right now, we get media attention all the time. Like, I'm in the news, and like some of you people who know me, I'm like every other week, I'm like, oh, I was in the newspaper again. Oh, here's another news article about us, and oh, we're on the radio this time. It's like constant for me here. And so getting media attention isn't very hard. I've got like about a dozen different reporters who are constantly like, let me know when something's happening. So also, I've done a lot of projects for PR and things like that for some clients where we got stories into places like Bloomberg and Reuters for them. So I'm no stranger to the power of our promotion, and the bunker itself and its story is so unique and so captivating to people who hear about it that it grabs people's attention, it cuts through the noise, and then people start to look at what's going on with creating a business completely on the blockchains that's actually bricks and mortars, with a traditional business in the sense of the data center, which is a growing industry in itself, coupled with a controversial business, which is this whole growing medical marijuana and whatnot. Here in Canada, it's not really that controversial, but it's something that's going to grab the attention of people. And then here we are using this cryptocurrency blockchain called BitShares that is going to is something that's supposed to be ahead of Bitcoin. Like, we're not using Bitcoin, we're using BitShares. What's this BitShares? So I'm really seeing this as a tremendous case study opportunity for BitShares to be able to get out into the marketplace and see how it could be used. Besides the grow up and the data center, I also would expect that with the social consensus involved and directing things, people are going to have ideas. People are going to be like, hey, we have this opportunity to do something here that could be great. And if the social consensus agrees, we have space for labs at the bunker. We still have like tens of thousands of square feet that I haven't accounted for the 64,000 that could be used for these labs, whether it's dedicated developers or whether it's rapid prototyping of some ideas that might increase efficiency or produce products that could fuel the industry. These are things that are all possible, and everybody who's involved in Bunker Shares would have a part of. So I think I did a concise brief of this. I'd really like to hear ideas on what people's impressions are and how we might actually approach this. Because right now, like I said, I'm in a fork in a road. I've got two directions I could take. I could just, say yes to these investors and I'll probably make tons of money and everything will be fine like that. But I continue to be part of the system. But the system that's not so good. Or I can create this Bunker Shares thing out of BitShares and create something totally unique and grab the world's attention and raise BitShares to a whole other level. Oh, by the way, in terms of money we're talking about here, so far we've created the user issue assets. My initial goal for the initial crowdfunding offering is approximately $10 million US, give or take. So my initial thoughts on how to do that would be that we'd be making an offering that actually sells each bunker share pegged at the value of a BitShare. So we'd be accepting BitShares or BTS, and the BTS would be converted to BitShares. All the money then would be held in reserve in BitShares until such time as it's needed. Again, the social consensus, people who are smarter than me would probably decide that it's probably smart for us to put our assets into other areas that might be higher yielding in interest and whatnot until such times as the funds are required. And then once the crowdfunding offering is done, then the asset gets traded on the open market. And at that point, it's my expectation that the values of those shares that people bought into are going to increase significantly. So they can buy and sell and trade. And if they want to divest, so they're completely liquid in this entire thing, rather than putting money into something and being stuck. So yeah, it's a very low risk proposition, I think. And again, being part of this social consensus is something I'm really excited about, because I believe that it would provide a framework for others to see, and a case study for BitShares that will really get people's attention, because once again, it's a bunker. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to share with you guys a link. This is just a really quick brief based on the latest ideas and how this all comes together. There's a few pictures of the bunker here and there, and the ideas behind this. And again, I'm looking for feedback. I'm looking for ideas. I'm looking for, you think this is sink or swim. I'm open to hearing it all. That's okay. So fire away.
Fadat is asking if you're looking to hire a grower.
Yes. As a matter of fact, the town next to us is actually where the agricultural university for Dalhousie is located. So we have a campus right next to us that's teaching students agriculture. So we could get agricultural graduates right from the get-go. Another feature about the bunker that I didn't mention is that this used to be a military base, and we're located right next to a private airport. So the private airport also has full customs clearance. So we have the capability for exports that would be secure by air flight with almost no shipping required, like in terms of trucking and things like that. So it's another value-added asset to the bunker.
And this is a joint question between Fadat and Riverhead. Is this going to be a DAC of its own, or is it going to be a user-issued asset?
Yeah, I'm looking at this being a user-issued asset right now. I think that that's the best way to go. I have two reasons. Number one, putting a DAC together is going to be, a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of resources, and I don't think that this really warrants that. I think the user-issue asset ecosystem, once they implement the features that they're talking about in terms of the permission control and all that kind of stuff, once that's all implemented, I think that the user-issue asset will be an ideal ecosystem. And also, I really like to be able to allow people to be able to trade their bunker shares against other assets that are out there. Something about the compensation I didn't mention, actually, now that you're asking about user-issue assets, we've created two other user-issue assets besides bunker shares. One of them is called cannabis. That is the symbol for it. And it's based on cannabis growing license operators. The other is called DataSec, Data SEC, which is based on data security shares. And so those are really focused on the industry as a whole and what people will trade for in regards to what's happening with the supply and demand and the industry that's growing. These are all multi-billion-dollar industries that are just exploding. Like the cannabis industry is growing like crazy. You have the data center industry and data security industry just growing like crazy. So these are all really high-yielding industries. Part of my initial thought was that after the ICO, all those who actually supported the ICO and got involved are going to get a share drop in both those industries equal to what they're holding. So with that, they would essentially triple their holding and be able to, and that at that point we would open the market. So again, another way that we would increase the value for those that purchase bunker shares.
That's awesome. One other question that I personally have. How is this going to work as far as the legal aspect of investing in this? Let's say the operation doesn't work out. Are there going to be any legal aspects holding any accountability to the project?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Of course, that's the first that comes to most people's minds. There's limitations to how many real shares in a company that could be issued as far as private holdings go. And this is where this offering is really based on a social contract. Once we've actually done our initial crowdfunding offering and it's out there, I really have a social contract to everybody to, do what I set out to do. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not some guy sitting on a couch on his laptop saying, yeah, we're going to do this and that, and it's some kind of virtual asset. Meanwhile, I set up a company in Panama. No, we're real. We're located on a bunker that's not exactly mobile. So it's easy for anyone to knock on my door and say, hey, you screwed me if I did screw somebody. So there's always that. And we live right here on the base, 2 minutes away from the bunker. So I'm not going anywhere. As far as the legal aspects are concerned, for that reason, you don't want to have legal aspects in terms of the connection to the corporations themselves and the liability involved with that. However, I would be looking to move shareholdings into a trust. So we'd be setting up the trust so that in the event that something was to take place, say I died or something like that, then the trust would handle divesting the value of whatever is there to the shareholders. So there would be a framework put together for that, and that's how I envision that. However, again, I'm here for ideas. So if there are other ideas on how that could be done in an eloquent way, that'd be great. I'm listening.
So, Data, first of all, you and I have to have a long conversation because I realize now that you're trying to do basically the same thing that Don is trying to do, which is, bootstrap a company via having a user-issued asset, which makes perfect sense. I think it's what BitShares was made for. But to be really brief, what are your plans for software for running the...
I'm sorry, is the question only what are our plans for software for running... for running the social consensus? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. For creating, because you're not just creating a company, you're kind of creating a community around that. And one of the plans that Don has is that voting is going to be a required thing within the Dawn Corporation. When people don't vote, it's going to dilute the power of their subsequent votes. It's part of a system that we're putting together. I'm just curious what you've got in terms of that system, because that system, I think, creates a lot of the security that Fuzz was just talking about, the safety.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be, in terms of how that's going to come about, that's a really good question. The difficulty in answering that, however, though, is that there really is nothing out there because nothing like this has ever been done as far as like applying it to a company per se. So I would suggest, and what's in my mind right now, I mean, as far as platforms concerned, any kind of a social sharing platform that's out there really would work essentially. There's things like, karma plugins and whatnot. The more you participate, the more XYZ and so on. And that would, help with voting and whatnot. But I really didn't think of anything like where people don't participate, they get their influence gets diluted. I've never thought along those lines. My initial thoughts are very just cut and dry of like, whoever has the most holding would have the most weight, and everybody can participate. Everybody can put in their ideas. Everybody has knowledge and information that they can share to partake. And out of that pool, we would want to hire people that are clearly the cream of the crop. So I think that I'm not looking like we're not looking to make this like some kind of giant volunteer base or something like that. No, that just doesn't work. I mean, we're talking real business here that has the dollars to get it done. So I think right now I'm thinking along lines of just straight shareholders have the power of the vote. People can put up things for the vote in terms of what direction we take. My role really would be as a facilitator to ensure that we're getting the questions that need to be answered, providing the feedback and information on what was the result of, for example, like a survey that took place at the bunker that day. I would provide all that information so that people could discuss. And in terms of platform, I looked at lots of open source platforms out there and communities, and I actually thought that Buddy Press with some modifications would probably be ideal. Would take a couple of MySQL-backed servers to take care of the bloat. But besides that, I'm actually just learned about this canonizer. And I'd like to talk to Brent about that afterwards, because looking at canonizer, this looks like the solution. It's clearly has the elements that we need to get this done. And it's putting together everybody and using the algorithm in such a way that we actually create a social consensus. And I realize that in the community, it's going to be difficult to, deal with the differing opinions or whatnot. But at the end of the day, I believe that everyone wanting to move forward is going to move it forward. It's not kind of like every man for himself in an ecosphere. It's, this is a company and we all want it to grow, and we're going to make decisions that are going to encourage that growth. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts. So that's as far as I got as far as the software goes.
I had a question as far as your business model. You threw out a figure of $10 million. What are you basing this off of? The equipment, the electrical systems that needing to probably be upgraded, drainage, water supply. I mean, where are you coming up with 10 million?
Correct on all fronts. Yeah, it's really basically the startup capital to getting these operations going. These are approximations. These are estimates based on feedback from people that I already know, and also with my own experience in the data center industry, who have, doing a quick breakdown of what it's going to cost to get it done. In terms of the grow up operation, we're looking at approximately $4 million for what we're looking for the space that we're doing and what we would produce. In terms of the data center operation, we're looking at approximately, again, close to $4 million. It would probably be somewhere closer to 3. Again, this all has to do with infrastructure improvements, and it has to do with, purchasing network equipment and servers and whatnot. So it's literally largely for the implementation of all these systems. And then in terms of the remaining, it would be for core staff to get started on things. My initial thoughts are to ramp up slowly. We have a capacity for up to 150, 200 people working at the bunker each day. So I, of course, would, with the crowdsource, though, I'd be interested in remote workers as well. But in terms of where it's all going, that's the basic breakdown right there. So it's largely going into capital assets for the startup, and also into supporting for core staff while we get started.
I'm not sure if you considered this, but you do realize that having a data center and then a grow op is completely counterproductive. Data center is going to generate a lot of heat, which you don't want. The grow op is going to generate a lot of moisture and heat, which you don't want, and is probably not good for computer parts. They don't really work together. You're actually going to probably spend more electricity to give each environment what it wants and needs. So I'm not sure if you've considered that.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll get into some of the value adds of what the bunker's features has to offer. In terms of the data center operation, we are not going to use traditional pushing air around and whatnot like most data centers are doing and have. It's highly inefficient. We're looking to utilize new technologies. I've already made a connection with a clustered systems, which is, from my estimates and the work I've done in researching, the most efficient system for utilizing water cooling technologies. The bunker has access to a giant aquifer that's located beneath us. This aquifer supplies limitless water. We, at present, with our current systems, are able to pump up to 120 gallons per minute. And that would just go for 24/7 forever. The bunker was designed that way. Back when it was operational with the military, it was constantly pulling on this water, and it would use it to cool its systems, and then also cool the generators, and then cool the build, like whatever the building needed cooling. And then it would take all the water and just dump it. It would just dump it back into the system. And so there was this nice little trench that actually led out to the bunker, and there was a whole little ecosphere that built out of that trench, but now it's gone because the water's not running anymore. But that water is there. So part of our plans are to utilize water cooling technologies, which means that the heat that's produced is actually going to be dissipated within the water. We can recover that heat and then utilize it as part of making the space for the growing operations more efficient in terms of providing the heat. If not in the growing operations, we can utilize that for heating the rest of the building. In terms of the grow up operations, licensing requirements require that there are very stringent growing conditions in terms of the building itself. We would have to put up things like stainless steel walls. The entire operation has to work on negative air pressure, which means that the entire damp environment, which is absolutely, you're right, is necessary for the growing, is going to be self-contained. So it would be within a space within the bunker that's completely self-contained. And the data center, likewise, is actually self-contained within a capsule. It's a double steel reinforced copper beryllium lined shielded room, which is located in the bunker, and that's where NATO and D&D had their operations running from. And that's where the data center operations are focused. So to answer your question in terms of like the technical specs of how that works, it actually works out quite elegantly. And with the renewable energy that we have available, we'll provide the energy for the growing operation, as well as, again, the heat that's necessary to complete their growing, and also to complete the processing of the products.
So obviously there has to be outside ventilation so you can breathe. but is it going to be adequate for something of this scale? Because you were talking about how well it's sealed. In this instance, you don't want it sealed too well, or there's no CO2, which obviously they need.
Absolutely. Well, the ventilation system was designed to support life for 350 people. So there is a lot of air available from outside. That kind of air would be adequate for growing generally. And of course, we would just, pipe that in to where that's located. The data node, however, is not going to have breathable air. We're going to be using, again, another new technology. It's called zero burn. And what it would do is actually it would prevent fires from being capable, which is it basically will create a low oxygen environment, which would prevent the data center so that in the event that there was some kind of a fire event, instead of it bursting into flames, it would just smolder. And then aspirators would detect it, and then we could respond to it without the entire place going up in flames. So the node, in its design, being shielded as it is very suitable for that kind of operation because it's going to be closed off all the time. As for the grow-up operations, they would, again, like I said, it would be a negative pressure space. The air that we have, the air capacity we have from outside, like right now, our air handlers will blow 12,000 CFMs, right? Which is just the place is like a giant wind tunnel, basically, when you have all the systems going. So there's no lack of air availability. Now, if we needed more CO2 for higher growth, remember we're actually going to be running on biofuels from the generators. So that means that we would be producing CO2s, which we could potentially then pipe off and pump into those rooms to enhance growing if we wanted to.
All that sounds, that sounds pretty good. And now that I understand a little more of your system, it doesn't sound as bad as I thought it sounded at first. Have you tested the local water supply to make sure that it's what you need? For like total dissolved solids, things like that.
Yeah, the water we have in this area is actually extremely good quality. For many years, I could tell you stories anyway, but the water has been tested in the past, and it's been adequate. We don't have hard water issues here. The aquifer is just an amazing environmental find for this area. And in terms of what we can do, it might make sense to actually, put in a filtration system for the water that we have. But like I said, it's essentially well water, which is in ample supply. At present, there's no problem. Like back when the place was operational with the D&D, they actually built a tap right into the pipeline that allowed people that work there to be able to get the water directly coming from the well rather than going through the chlorination system. And they did that because the water was just so much better, and it was that good quality. So we don't have hard water issues where we're located.
The only other thing that I'd probably like to see, because everything it sounds like you've done a lot of work and a lot of research into this, which is good. You're thinking ahead, which is great. Is just kind of a breakdown of cost. I'd be curious to see what you're being charged to upgrade your electrical system. I'd be curious to see what you are expecting to spend on your equipment. We could have this whole LED versus high pressure sodium lights all day long argument, but I'd be curious to see the breakdown of cost. And then finally, if you've actually talked to any, dispensaries. I mean, at the end of the day, producing it is one thing and then selling it is another. It needs to be economically viable. The fact that your energy is not free but low cost is a huge advantage. But it needs to make dollars to make sense.
I completely agree with you. And in terms of, the energy, again, also is renewable, which is something that's lacking in that industry in particular as far as grow operations go. I mean, the amount of energy that's required for them is tremendous. And of course, that energy usually comes from dirty places. But in our situation, we would be energy independent because we would be running on our own generators. Again, these are baseload generators. There's the same kind of generators out there that have been running for 300,000 plus hours. They're just machine, like they're just amazing, and we're very lucky to have them. But in terms of the breakdown of the costs and whatnot, this again comes back to the social consensus, because where my thought process happened is that I realized after having a conversation with one person I knew who was an expert in this field and is actually in the process of getting licensing, I realized that I don't know this business. And you're right. You have to have the markets. You have to have this. You have to know the product. And to do that without knowing that is ridiculous. And this is where the social consensus comes in. This is where I want the blockchain to formulate the plan, to crowdsource the knowledge and the expertise that's out there. Because I realized that I could look around my area and I could probably find that guy that knows his stuff and this and that, and we could probably put a little thing together, and then we can go off and get money, and then nobody would be involved, and we would have our own little private operation. But I'm of the belief that there's a lot of people that are much smarter and have something to contribute that together can make something that's superior. You have people who are bunker shareholders. Everybody has a brother who has a sister who has an uncle that is involved somewhere in some way that is going to be able to get us access to various markets or to various suppliers or have contributions on ideas and that are going to propel us forward better than what one core team can come up with. So this is what I'm excited about in terms of like the Bunker Shares offering, is that people are buying in and are getting involved, and from the very start, planning and putting together what will be a superior plan that would be executed by a worldwide social consensus.
With all that being said, before you start attaching a dollar figure on the amount that you're seeking, it may be worth, investigating, how much it's going to cost to do all this stuff. How can you attach, you say $10 million and it's going to be $4 million for this and $4 million for that. Your data servers, obviously the numbers are going to be pretty accurate, but you already admitted that, the other field isn't necessarily something that you know a lot about. So until you're able to see what the actual cost of the equipment, the people that are going to run the project, and then finally, the distributors that are going to buy it from you, like what the actual wholesale pricing is, I think you may want to investigate that before you say, $4 million.
Yeah, just so you know, that number I got was based on the information I got from my associate who is in the process of licensing his own operation. That conversation I had with him was what kind of prompted this whole thing. I was hoping with talking to him that I could somehow have him involved. I've been approached by close to about a half a dozen different interests that are looking to get into the medical marijuana grow op, and they were looking at the bunker as a location. And so of all the people I saw, and all the people I met, this guy was the only one that I thought really had a head on his shoulders, like really understood from from growing all the way to the market and how to approach it and branding and everything else. This guy had a handle on it. So I had a long conversation with him, talked about what it was I was looking to do. I told him, I said, we're looking to do a crowdfunding. That's where we'll get the capitalization. What do you believe it's going to take for the bunker location if we were going to operate this amount of square footage? And that was his answer. His answer was $4 million. So it's based on his expertise that I'm putting that number out there. It could very well be more or less. The whole process will require engineering. And then, of course, where we get our supplies from and what kind of products we use to implement things like you said, sodium or LED. Maybe bunker share holders, some of the bunker share holders are LED manufacturers who decide that they want to get in on this. They'll be able to put forth their proposal for why their LED should be used for this operation. How it's where are we going to get the supplies for the stainless steel? What kind of air handlers? All this kind of stuff is going to come down to basically getting input from the social consensus on what's out there and what's available, and incorporate that into our plans. And then people will be able to vote up or vote down what they think is going to work or what they would like to go with. So that's all part of the process. Like I said, I am fully cognizant of the fact that I am not an expert in that business. You want to talk about the data center business? I can run numbers back and forth and left and right, front and center, no problem. But as far as that business, I'm not so versed. But at the same time, I also know that I'm not the end all be all, whatever you want to say, Mark Zuckerberg of data centers either. There's other people out there that are smarter than me, or other people that are more cognizant of certain markets that are available, or certain types of hardware which I'm not familiar with. And in that case, the social consensus system and this community that we build with Bunker Shares would allow for everybody to make those contributions so that we could actually have a superior offering or even superior operations. So I understand where you're coming from as far as like the traditional model is concerned. I'm very familiar with that, been doing that for decades. But I'm trying to create something or trying to lead something here which could be used as a potential model for other businesses who, especially DAC businesses in BitShares, for what could be created for a social consensus business. This is really new ground. And I've done, as you noted, I have done some basic research and have a basic handle on the numbers. And all of it is based on, most of it is based on what others have given me on input as to what it's going to take to get it done. So in terms of the capitalization, though, it's not, you don't want to meet, penny for penny exactly what you think it's going to cost. You need a reserve. And so we want to come in under budget always so that we have the reserve to execute once things are functional. As far as the grow-up operation is concerned, I know that it's going to take time until we could actually sell our first plant. But during that time, we're going to be able to implement the updates for the data center in much shorter order and get products like the cloud storage, for example, or for virtual servers that are accepting BitShares for payment out there. That's going to be generating profits much faster than the growing operations.
Okay, I have an objection to this. I fully support your data center idea, but the grow up I'm totally against, because you're going to be relying on government to enforce a monopoly, so to prevent competition, and that's exactly against what BitShares is trying to accomplish.
It's a valid point.
Wait, is that really the case, though? He's registering with the government, and yes, okay, the government does block others from joining the industry, but others can join the industry using the same process that he wants to use.
No, he's relying on the government to prevent people from growing their own at home.
I suppose that's true, and once upon a time, I agree with you on that point 110%.
And it's about to change, too. So everyone's going to be able to have free marijuana all they want, I bet, fairly soon.
We hope that's about to change. I wouldn't say anything's definite in the realm of government.
Well, if he does set up that model, I'll do everything I can to disrupt his model.
How would you do it? I'm serious. I'm curious. Try to distribute home grow kits? I've frankly thought of that. Marijuana shouldn't be illegal. I do everything I can to help people grow their own marijuana. The current situation is immoral. It's wrong.
Yes, it's immoral and it's wrong, and therefore I wouldn't support that part of his business proposition.
Can I ask, and this is a question that I've pondered myself. There are those who suggest that it would be an appropriate method to kind of use like a step-by-step approach. So work with the system until you outgrow the system, and then change it from the inside whenever you have grown to the point where you have a little bit more clout, a little bit more backing, and a little bit more resources to fight the fight. However, there is at the same time a very large incentive to start wanting to rely on the system to help enforce a monopoly for you once you're at that level. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there is a model that would work. He could try to compete in an honest fashion, but because he has a very good opportunity to grow large amounts of marijuana, and there are certain medicines made from marijuana that require refining of it into an oil, which people use as a medicine, and that can only be done on a large scale.
Go ahead, Data. This is actually something I think you've talked about a little bit.
Yeah. Again, this is a licensed medical marijuana operation. The emphasis is medical, I guess. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about that. I mentioned in the document that I shared something about Bunker Labs. I am not so excited about the prospects of the product itself. I'm cognizant of the fact that the markets will shift and that the value of the product will change. there is medical research being done and opportunities in that to be able to enhance and to learn more about the cannabis plant. And as I said, we have an agricultural center like right next to us. Part of what I think makes this business also exciting is the prospects of being able to produce other products and services which support the industry. I've had conversations with some people just last night. I was saying, how are these companies gonna handle these regulations, or how are they going to, how is this whole new distribution going to happen? And I think you're going to get government wanting to have their hand in it, just like alcohol, just like all the others. There's a saying, when the gold rush happened, who were the ones that got rich? It wasn't the miners, it was the pick and axe and shovel makers. And the grow operation does produce the product, but I think there's more opportunities in terms of what kind of services that we'd be able to produce out of that. Well, I know that one particular requirement of these operations to run is having huge volumes of storage of their video. Their video security has to be stored off-site in a secure place. We have the data center right there to do that. There's a marriage opportunity for our data operations with the medical marijuana operation to produce potential blockchain technologies that are associated with healthcare and how it's delivered. And I think that's where there's larger opportunities available. But again, I'm largely expecting that ideas like this are going to come out from the social consensus in the group that will be able to vote up or vote down any ideas that could potentially lead to these things.
I have an idea about the growing thing, which might be more community driven. How about renting out some of the crop being grown? So just like you're renting out your machines, you could also rent out space to grow that stuff and outsource that. So people can buy their own plot and then have a stake in your operation, and you just offer the facilities to grow it.
As long as it's compliant with the licensing that we have, that sounds feasible, because part of the business would be involved, would be actually supplying directly to people who have prescriptions for medical marijuana. So something along the lines of having a plot that's dedicated to a certain strand, which certain customers require, that sounds like it would actually line up.
And it would also solve the issue about it putting other people out of the market.
Arhag is asking, he says, you said you want to offer 1 billion bunker at 1-to-1 for BTS in an attempt to raise 10 million, and that you will hold that until the ICO is over. Why expose yourself to the volatility of BTS? You should instead offer 10 million bunker at 1-to-1 for BitUSD. That way you do not need to lose the value of your holdings if BTS price falls during the IPO.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good idea. You see, it's working already. I was looking for that kind of
because BitUSD, yeah.
On that note, thank you, Data, for coming and giving everybody the opportunity to give their input. Data, is there any website that you can link them to or give them information on? Let them know how they can contact you on the forums.
Yeah, that brief I just shared, the link with the Dropbox, it gives all my contact information if you want to reach me, either email, telephone, Skype. Also gives you a link to our Facebook page so you can see all the stuff that's happening at the bunker. It's all there in the document I just put from Dropbox.